Hi, welcome to the video on adjectival modification. This is going to differ than the last video, which was on adverbial modification, in that adjectival modification is going to modify another noun rather than the whole sentence as itself or just the verb. And just to review a little bit, remember that the sentence is broken up into a few parts. We have the kernel, which is the main part of the sentence. This is your subject, your verb, and possibly your direct object at this point. We have conjunctions, which connect different things, and we have your modifiers. And remember that your modifiers are then broken into two parts: your adverbial and your adjectival, which I'm just going to abbreviate ADJ here. Okay, so for adverbial now, we know the ablative case and prepositions, and we're going to be doing adjectives and the genitive case for our adjectival modification. And if you look at this example right here, this is how a genitive is going to look in Latin, just to give you a little bit of a heads up. We have the gray cat of Mr. Haydn. First of all, we have an adjective in English modifying cat with a color. Okay, so gray modifies cat. But then we also have this of Mr. Haydn idea, which in English is a preposition, but in Latin is going to actually just be the genitive case, as it shows possession, and it's answering the question, whose cat? So we're considering it an adjective modifying cat. So the first part of adjectival modification we'll cover is adjectives themselves, and they work pretty much the same way as in English but they have more rules. So we're dealing with the same concepts here, though. We're talking about things like number. We're thinking about color. Any kind of characteristic of a noun that gets described in a text is probably going to be used as an adjective. In Latin, though, these are things that are going to agree with nouns, and we know things like gender and number and case now. Adjectives have to agree with nouns in all these three things, namely case, number, and gender. If it only agrees with two of these three things, it does not agree. If it agrees in one of these things, it definitely does not agree. It has to agree in all three of these things in order to agree with a noun. So you ask yourself, does it have to have the same declension as a noun? The answer is an emphatic no, it does not. You might have a third declension noun and a second declension adjectives that do agree. And they will have different endings, so it'll be a little confusing, but you do have to notice that they agree. But let's look at an adjective dictionary entry, and we'll do more work with agreement in the next slide. The dictionary entry of an adjective, much like bonus here, which is a good example, this kind of category with the us, endings have first and second declension endings based on the gender. Now, this is an area where nouns and adjectives are not going to be the same, because we know that nouns have words that break the rules of declension meaning gender necessarily, especially in the third declension when it's kind of a grab bag. Adjectives will use declension to show gender. So our neuter and our masculine will be in the second declension, and our first declension will be the feminine endings, for sure, in adjectives. Not necessarily in nouns, though. So if we go on that here, we see a nice order where you have masculine, feminine, and neuter in that order, and it will always be in that order, even when we get to third declension adjectives later in the year. So you'll notice that the masculine is always given first, the feminine second, the neuter third. And you can see the us, endings in the nominative singular form. They do decline just like nouns do in these declensions. But again, the masculine is going to follow second declension, the feminine is going to follow first declension, and the neuter is going to follow the second neuter rules. Okay, so there's going to be two UMs, and there are going to be two A's in the nominative and accusative plural. So knowing that these adjectives have to agree with nouns in three different things, case, number, and gender, let's do a little bit of an exercise here. We have to ask ourselves if malo, which is from malus at the top meaning bad, agrees with the following nouns, and we're going to say yes or no for each one. But again, notice our dictionary entry has our masculine, feminine, and neuter form in the second, first, and then second declension again. I might call this in class a 2-1-2 adjective. Let's get started here. Gladiatori, we know that that's from gladiator, gladiatoris, so it's third declension. But we don't really pay attention to declension, do we? We pay attention to case, number, and gender. So, when it's third declension, we know it's dative, we know it's singular, and we know it's masculine. Now, does malo agree in case, number, and gender? The answer is yes, it does, because malo can be, let's go over here with malo. Malo can be ablative or dative, masculine, and singular. Okay, so those are the criteria we're looking for in our noun, and since this is dative, singular, masculine, it does agree. So, hoorah. Mente, if we look it up in our dictionary entry, is ablative, it is singular, but alas, it is feminine. So, it agrees with two of the three criteria. It does not agree. Okay, not even close. Ocasio looks as the same ending. Okay, it's the O ending, but we know from our vocabulary that ocasio is actually from occasionis. That's feminine. So we first of all know that this is nominative singular. Okay, this is nom singular, and it's feminine, so it does not agree at all, even though it has the same ending. We have to look out for that. We're going forward with virum here. We have our um ending on virum. We know that that's an accusative singular ending. In this case, we say, well, we need an ablative or dative ending to agree, so accusative's out of luck. Now we have agricoli. Okay. In the first declension, it could be dative, so we're happy there a little bit, right? We know it's singular if it's dative in the first declension. But you're thinking, well, it's first declension, it has to be feminine. But remember, that's one of those pain words. And these, remember, are the words that are masculine, even though they're in the first declension. So, agricoli does agree, because it is masculine. And those are your dictionary entries for the ones that are masculine in the first declension. This means poet, this means farmer, this means inhabitant, and this means sailor. Okay? Just so you know. Alright. The other form of adjectival modification we're going to go over is the genitive case. And you probably recall those from your declining work in class and for your homework. But just in case, I will go over the endings right now. In the first declension, the singular form is an AE, and the plural form is an ARUM. Your second declension is going to be an I in the singular, and an ORUM in the plural. In your third declension, it's going to be a short IS ending in the singular. And a UM ending in the plural. Okay, so your endings here are AE and ARUM for the first declension, the I and the ORUM in the second declension, and the short IS and the UM in the third declension. Now you're probably still wondering what the genitive case is doing, even though you know the endings. It shows possession. So if we go over here, you see it shows possession. You remember my first slide where it said the gray cat of Mr. Haydn? It's that of Mr. Haydn part that in Latin would be in the genitive case. And to translate, I want you all to think that you can translate with the preposition of. It's going to be one of those things that's kind of odd because you're going to be translating one word with a preposition in English. You're not going to see the preposition of in Latin. You're just going to have that genitive case, which you're going to start translating with the word of and then the word after it. And I hope that these examples will show you what I mean by that. So we'll look at this first one, mentes equorum. You see that we have an ES ending, and that could be accusative or nominative. We're not worried about that right now. We're not metaphrasing. We're just going to translate these little word chunks. And we see this orum ending, ORUM, and we see this right here in the second declension plural. So we know that it's genitive. And we can say, well, I know mentes means mind. So this is simply the minds of horses. Or we could say of the horses, that's fine too. But I want to point out to you that we kept our plural from English to Latin there, so that's consistent. And we translated equorum as of horses. Okay? So you can see here how the genitive case has that preposition in English, does not have the preposition in Latin. This is just simply for the fact that two different languages don't always have identical words lining up nicely. That's just the nature of foreign language, so we have to get used to that. The next one, periculum amoris, periculum being the neuter, and it's singular. It doesn't really matter though. It means danger, so we say the danger. And then we have amoris, and we say, oh, it's from amor, amoris. We say that's third declension with that is ending. That's genitive for sure. And we translate it with of, love. Again, I want to point out to you amoris is genitive, so we translated it with that preposition in English of, and we say, okay, well, genitive of, therefore amoris is of love, the danger of love. Finally, we have filio Cleopatrae. Here we have our dative ablative filio, okay, and Cleopatrae, which could be a few things, right? It could be nominative plural, it could be dative singular, or it could be genitive singular. However, for this exercise, we're going to say it's genitive because that's what we're doing right now. And again, we're not metaphrasing. We don't need to show all possibilities here. All we need to do is just know how to translate genitives. So this is out of context, and you will not likely just see this as the sun. It might be to, for the sun, or by or with the sun, or something like that. But again, we're out of context. I don't want you to worry about that right now. The son of Cleopatra. And yet again, we see the of as our translation of Cleopatra, the genitive. Okay. I want you to also notice I draw arrows from the genitive to the noun it modifies. These are adjectival modifiers. Okay. So these red arrows that I'm drawing show you that genitive is modifying that noun. And genitives don't always modify things that come before them, but it is common. It's more common than modifying something that comes afterwards, so keep that in mind as you go forward. I figured we'd have an example of a sentence and an example of a metaphrase before we conclude this video, so let's walk through this one together. We immediately start with aquam. We notice that it's accusative, so we can label it such, and we can probably say that it is the direct object. We see puram. Now we know puram is an adjective from our dictionary entry, and we notice that it agrees with aquam in case, number, and gender. They're both accusative, singular, and feminine. So we're saying, well, I'm going to draw that arrow right there. Okay. Now we get to hominis. Hominis has an is ending. We know it's third declension from our dictionary entry. So we say, well, that's definitely genitive. And genitives do have to modify another noun, but we're going to hold off on doing that just for a second, and we're going to move on to bony, which also could be genitive and is very likely genitive because of ominous next to it, but it also could be nominative plural. So we have to kind of delay that for a second, but the likelihood is that it's agreeing with ominous. If we were to have some nominative plural come next, that's when we would have to start questioning bony. But when we see fur right afterwards and we say, okay, that's nominative, but that's singular, so bony can't agree with it, we're safe saying bony goes with ominous right next to it. We also, with fur, can decide that ominous likely is going with aquam. I say that because the possession here is not likely that the man owns a thief, but has water. So we're going to draw that adjectival line this way. And I forgot to do this, but we're going to label this as a genitive. Okay. Bony, again, is our adjective, also genitive, agreeing with ominous. For, like I said, is going to be our nominative, and then likely our subject of the sentence. Capere, I hope you notice the ere here is an infinitive. Okay, and then audet is our main verb with that et ending, and we know it means to dare, and it takes a complementary infinitive, so that makes us happy. So, verb. With that in mind, we can then move on to our sentence here, our translation. And we say that fur is the subject, so we start with that. We say the thief. And then we have to go to our verb after that. Capere audet, dares to take. Our direct object aquam, but it has that adjective with it. Pure water. Oops. Pure water. And we have that genitive, and from the previous slide you remember that the genitive is translated like of, so the thief dares to take the pure water of the good man. And notice bony, our arrow here, showing that good goes with man, just like in the English we have down here the good man, where the good modifies the man as well. Okay? Now, when we metaphrase, we see corpus magnus, and we say, well, they look like they agree. But if we look up corpus, we'll find out that it is neuter. Okay? This is, let me write the dictionary entry down here, I'll erase it afterwards so that it doesn't get in the way. We notice that corpus corporis is neuter, and thus when we see magnus with a us ending, and we say, well, magnus is nominative, singular, masculine, we know that it can't agree with corpus, even though it has that same ending. So this is going to be a false friend because it does not agree with corpus. Does not. So when we metaphrase this and we say, okay, remember our neuter rules here, that corpus can be nominative or accusative, singular, neuter. Okay? So, if we have a nominative singular masculine, we know that whatever Magnus is modifying that comes after it is likely going to be the subject here. In fact, we're pretty positive it is. But we still have to translate that adjective in our metaphrase. So we do it as an adjective. We would say the, let's say great instead of large, just for fun. The great subject. We don't have a verb. Verbs. And now we're saying that because this is nominative singular masculine, this one probably can't be nominative. In fact, it's very, 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 very unlikely that it's nominative. So it's accusative because we have our nominative singular already. And that means it's the direct object. And we can say the great subject verbs the body. And there you are. So the moral of that metaphrase is that, first of all, expectations can start canceling each other out. So when you have Magnus, we know it's nominative masculine singular, and thus corpus, being nominative or accusative and not agreeing with Magnus, has to be accusative. And also, we see that these endings do not always dictate agreement. We see that this US ending on both of these is a false friend, because these two nouns do not agree in gender and thus do not agree at all. And we see in our final answer, the great subject verbs the body, that great and body do not agree in our metaphrase either. So that's the moral of that story. I know this is a bit tricky, especially with the new case, and also with adjectives being tricky when you have similar endings and different declensions and things, but I just want to let you know that you should watch this video as much as possible until you understand it. Rewind, listen to me explain things over and over again. It'll click. And do that along with the exercises we do in class, and this will happen. All right. You'll get used to adjectives agreeing with weird things, and you'll get used to the genitives in general. And in fact, you're going to start liking the fact that you can pretty much always translate them as of. So if you don't get it the first time, you might want to just rewatch this video a couple times, see if you get it, and make sure to always ask questions. You can email me as well. So I'm out, and good luck.